Day we arrive on the planet and blinking step into the sun. There's more to see than can ever be seen, more to do than can ever be done. Welcome to Retraction. It's a pod for you. It's Black History Month. And this is all for you. Black History.
Bravo. Bravo. You got through it. I didn't think you would even get through it. Once I knew where you were going, I was like, no way he's going to finish hard on this. No way. Good job, sir.
I did it about 12 times. Otherwise, that it would have been impossible. And I did it. You dared me, and I did it.
There you go. You nailed it. So that means you have a topic.
I do have a topic.
All right.
I did it. Huzzah!
Wow. You did it all the way around. You finished hard. You landed.
Well,
you after the landing.
After you chided me over sending you a Valentine's Day GIF or something from YouTube instead of doing my homework for the pod, I was like, well, I'm not gonna let this get me down. I'm gonna rise to the occasion. That's right.
Yeah. Someone wasn't ready to have a Black History Month topic, but then found Muscle Man Valentine stories to send me. So
I did. But anyway, yes. So it is Black History Month. We are trying to give some devotion to Black history during the month of February, which apparently is short for an actual reason. Jamie, why is Black History? Why is this month the shortest month of the year?
Well, it's not so much why February is short and coincidence of Black History Month being in February, but according to the internet, Black History Month is in February because it coincides with the birthdays of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. And apparently, at the time when this was all established, the Black community were celebrating those birthdays, according to the internet.
That's not so bad. I definitely, as a cynic, was thinking something much more nefarious, but I can't fault it if the birthdays of Frederick Douglass, who was a prominent African American figure, and Abraham Lincoln, the president who presided over the Emancipation, happened to have been born in February, shortest month of the year. That's just how the cookie crumbles. I guess that's just kind of unlucky. It's like being on the wrong African shore at the wrong time, like as a slave boat passes by or something, And
I'm sure
wrong place, wrong time. It just so happened that's just how the luck crumbled your way.
And the people that were agreeing to this were probably like, sold. February, shortest month of the year.
just like
sounds
that.
Good to me, guys.
You're the way. I was like, slave auction sold or sold. So got it. Got it. Anyway, get into it. Jamie, I have a question for you. Yep. When do you think of wrestling? And nope, not WWE, not Hulk Hogan, not that main event wrestling. I'm talking about wrestling.
Greco-Roman.
What? Yep, there we go. That's what I'm trying to say. What is your first thought when you think of that type of wrestling? What is your first thought?
Like real wrestling?
Yeah, real wrestling, not TV wrestling.
Because if you say what's your first thought of wrestling, it's definitely Hulk Hogan, Ultimate Warrior, Macho Man.
All right, stop. Yes, real wrestling. Real
wrestling? Yes. Well, then, my head goes to Greco-Roman wrestling.
And why is that?
I was going to say that's where it's all started, but I don't even know if that's true.
Yeah, so that's your inclination. That's your inclination. Your inclination was to say Greco-Roman wrestling, and that's where it all started.
At least those are the earliest accounts of it that I was aware of at the time when I was learning about that type of thing. But man, that could have been anywhere. Really, that originated from. I think it's like the pottery, the stuff that you like. You know what that is? You know what it is? It's probably that. It's the visual. Right. I am a visual learner.
Right.
And I remember seeing Greco-Roman pottery with the depictions of wrestling on it, and then it goes back to the Olympics, and that was one of the first events in the at least one of the primary events of the Olympics of that time. So I think it got a lot of publicity in my early education that way. But taking a more skeptical eye to it, I don't know if that's where it originated, but it is.
Well, I mean, you shouldn't. It's not about It's about the fact that is where you're thinking of your Western education upbringing. You're thinking about what you've seen either in Disney movies, classical art depictions. You're thinking Greco-Roman, Olympics. Obviously,
it has to be older though. I mean, what's more?
Well, it's
primitive than two people going.
Well,
at it, right?
That's sort of where I wanted to get to. I wanted you to think of that, and then let me take you here.
Take me there.
In an article titled "Illuminating the Fighting History of Ancient Africa." It was a Vice article done back in 2016. You should definitely check it out. I'm going to read an excerpt for you. In navigating the history of Africa, in particular sub-Saharan Africa, one must contend with the biases of those individuals, primarily Westerners, who viewed the indigenous population as other. Read accounts from Sir Henry Morton Stanley, David Livingstone, or even Joseph Conrad's novel, Heart of Darkness, to see how racism permeated the writings of these early explorers of the African continent. Additionally, the non-Egypt countries of Africa, where so many slave-holding countries attained their slaves, and there is no better way to dehumanize a group than to erase or ignore its history. But Africa, a tremendously vast continent that is home to numerous countries, states, cities, villages, camps, and tribes, has a history of fighting sports that is not limited to the story of Egypt. Like the Greeks and the Romans, the empty-hand combat sports of striking and grappling permeated nearly every group, large and small, in ancient Africa. And stick fighting, a sport not necessarily particular to ancient Africa, was of tremendous importance in these lands where carrying a stick could mean the difference in life or death. Going on to the next section titled Wrestling, that was a primer. In his book, Fighting for Honor, The History of African Martial Arts in the Atlantic, Dr. Thomas Deshobi notes that the early fighting sport historians incorrectly traced African wrestling styles to Egypt's Beni Hassan wrestling system. However, linguistic history and archaeological evidence of various non-Egyptian African populations demonstrate to modern historians that wrestling was widespread in almost all West African groups and a cultural trait of the Niger-Congo-speaking peoples. Fighting sports are found in nearly every tribal community in the African continent, but every group practiced and lived their martial art differently. The etiology of most of these fighting sports is rooted in the ludic function of using sport to practice for combat. In this way, fighting arts are remembered and shared as a means of protection and bringing glory to the tribe through successful application of the fighting sports' particular style. In other words, most African fighting arts were a direct corollary to combat. However, they also served as hierarchical function in many societies. In Egypt, wrestling contests bolstered the godliness of the pharaoh, and in many of the smaller communities, boys became men through the victories in wrestling.
Wow.
Now that's one part of it. The precursor to that, which they're already expecting you to know, is that most scholars attribute wrestling to ancient Egypt / Nubia, as in terms of like that upward swing into ancient Greece. Then Romans adopted it into the Western canon. So there's Egyptian pottery that predates a lot of the Greek pottery you may have seen in school that also depicts wrestling. In fact, that's from 3000 to 1100 BCE, has most sporting artwork around wrestling from Egypt.
And these accounts were, because obviously the Egyptians were well documented.
Right.
These accounts from other parts of Africa, where does their accounting come from? Did it say?
Yeah, well, it's okay. Well, unfortunately, the history, I don't want to. It doesn't say. It doesn't necessarily get into, not to discredit, because it's not. A lot of the history of Africa is oral tradition, so there aren't a lot of what would have been pottery, what would have been something historical that you could reflect to, were destroyed during colonization / wars / slave trade / what have you. So a lot of it is based in the fact that in today, modern Africa, specifically Senegal, for instance, like the national sport of Senegal is wrestling. And so basically historians and sociologists, archaeologists have basically determined that wrestling has gone on for thousands of years in Western Africa
because it's been handed down, because exactly. Those communities are ancient in a way,
and
right?
The fact that it still to this day has such a centralized place, like a very big foothold within the continent of Africa, specifically in West Africa. And so they're basically what do you call it? It's extrapolation to just how old this art form has been, and then it has been passed down and handed down through generation to generation.
And I think it's almost unique. Correct me if I'm wrong, but our way of thinking about this and why that may seem not hard to believe, but maybe not everyone's first reaction to hearing something like that, is that America is pretty unique in the way that we don't have ancient communities. We don't have communities that have been in place for thousands of years, like you may see in Asia or Africa or parts of Europe, right?
Right.
We don't have that, in a sense that it wouldn't be as prevalent as it is in some of those other places. So by having even just an oral tradition, it sounds like you could trace that back by talking to enough community members, by having mentions of it, I guess maybe not in such a formally documented way, but in other, I don't know if it would be art or something like that, but in other depictions, maybe. There's just probably more opportunity for it to be discovered, for it to be researched, because the communities have been there for so long, even though they may not have formally documented it.
No, that's a good point. Right. I mean, I think that's also another thing that needs to be taken into account especially when you talk about African history, because you have a westernized viewpoint of how history and how records are maintained, which is sort of what you're getting at.
Yeah.
And then if anything falls outside of that record keeping, it's almost deemed as if it was like it never happened, because we do not respect the oral tradition in the way that African cultures have for freaking centuries, thousands of years. And that it's a very Western mindset. Which cannot necessarily be applied to all corners of the earth. I mean, Africa's not just to be. India also has oral tradition. A lot of cultures have oral tradition, and it's through that oral tradition that archaeologists and researchers begin, if they're going to go and maybe excavate or look for something, like a lost city, for instance. Of that a lot of that stuff starts with oral tradition, pinpoint where it might have been found, and then you can maybe find the city. I'm going out there, but I'm just trying to say.
No, I remember
what I'm trying to say.
It's interesting because I remember, and again, I don't know, it's not apples to apples, but in terms of the amount of time areas have been settled by families that at their core have kind of stayed and resided. I remember hearing stories when we were in the Vietnam War and things were popping up about different places in Vietnam and Cambodia and the surrounding areas. But even more recently, when China was developing their dam, and some of the villages had to get flooded and they had to relocate them. And the stories coming out of how long these villages have been there and depended on the river for fishing and their livelihood. And it just kind of, it was like, wow, we just don't have that. I mean, I don't want to take away from the Native Americans and what they've been through, and the amount of time that they've been here, because I think it falls under a very similar category, if not the same. But obviously, things have changed in the U.S. and not a lot of people connect in that way. Whereas for other nations, other continents, I don't want to say they take it for granted, but that is just the norm for them. Where it's not so much the norm for the descendants of colonists and immigrants here.
Exactly. Although it is still the norm for descendants of slaves, because slave keeping records didn't document names. It only documented numbers. So it's the oral tradition for most African-American families. And if you're going to trace back generations to where they came from, how they migrated through the South, what have you, what they were doing, that's through oral records, because again, most slaves weren't allowed to learn to read or write. and the owners, slave masters, were not documenting the families. They were documenting numerical values because that's what they were: chattel slavery, almost like cattle. So they didn't give them names.
Wow. So
again, once again,
so wrestling. So what I was going to get to before was that
we could go back to wrestling.
So with Africa, it sounds like wrestling in terms of importing or exporting culture, wrestling grew in Africa independent of any outside influence, right?
That's correct. Yeah, that's.
But it wasn't necessarily that it originated there, because again, I feel like you could probably go back to, the Stone Age, and people were probably wrestling. I mean, there doesn't get more primal, more basic than two people in hand-to-hand combat. Now, at what point it becomes a sport? At what point are rules introduced where it's not just beat each other to death? I don't know, and I don't know how those things are shared amongst borders and nations.
Well, it's not. Well, here's the thing with it. I don't want to cut you off. Go.
No, it's fine. I'm not trying to take away from anything that you were saying, but I find it interesting because, especially when you look globally at history, you find things popping up within a few hundred years, even 1,000 years sometimes, which, in the grand scheme of things isn't that long when you're here for 500,000 years. But it's interesting to see the human experience kind of evolve almost in sync, barring any natural disaster that sets a civilization back.
You're absolutely right.
It's interesting to see these things pop up. So I'd be so curious to learn about. And you said about 3,000 BC.
Yep, that's correct.
I mean, that's hunter gatherers for a lot of areas. Yeah, that's a long. I mean, for Egypt, it's a little different, but
yeah. Well, I guess what I'm trying. Well, when I say Egypt, it means like Nuba of the Sudan, like Nubia. Because Egyptian culture derives out of the Nubian culture, which predated it. But what I think is really important, I think what you're kind of getting around to, is that it's not important as to who did it first. That's not really what's about the conversation. In fact, I mean, I feel like that's a very westernized view of like conversation. It's like, well, it's like who did it first? Who owned it? Who invented it? Who owned it? Exactly. You're right. Wrestling is a shared experience almost globally. Why I'm highlighting this and why I think this is important for Black History Month in particular is because if you Wikipedia the word wrestling right now, in Wikipedia, which is supposed to be a crowdsourced, log of facts, or they're supposed to, you're supposed to vet whatever. Wrestling does speak to that. Wikipedia will speak to wrestling in other countries. There's like a page for that, like a little section for that. It will talk about various wrestling in China, wrestling through Greco-Roman, English wrestling in the colonies. There is no mention of wrestling in Africa.
Get out, really?
Not one mention. If you just, I'm challenging.
That doesn't stick out as odd to anyone. That's
challenge the users out there. You look up wrestling and Wikipedia, and you will not find a single mention of wrestling in Africa. Outside of there might be something for Egypt, but outside of that, there's no mention of wrestling in Africa. And so part of why
it's Egypt. Yes. Is at the top. Babylonian,
right?
15,000 years ago.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is it's not about who did it first. It's about acknowledging that it's a shared experience, and that Africa in particular played a massive role in terms of where wrestling, like in terms of, it's just a bastion of wrestling, which is this classical hand-to-hand combat sport that we normally attribute to the Greeks as part of their neoclassical sort of upbringing into the world, part of their philosophy, part of the Olympics. And the thing is, Africa was doing the exact same thing. I guess that's what we want to come out of this, is that Africa was doing the exact same thing. It had philosophy, it had mathematics, and it had wrestling in the same classical sense as we would think of as the ancient Greeks. But when people think of wrestling, they only think of ancient Greece, even though we know that the Egyptians and Nubians had clay pottery and were also doing wrestling. That's my point. It's that being left out of the conversation that I think is so injurious to the African experience. And that's what I'm trying to highlight here. I'm trying to bring it back into the conversation to say that it wasn't this land of savage, uncivilized people that I feel that when you do not include them historically and things that other nations, other early civilizations were also embracing and adopting, it just lends to that ideology. It lends to this less than ideology. And that ideology is there on purpose. It's there. It's been made by those people who would benefit from having, again, a continent or a group of people viewed as less than human, dehumanizing. Part of dehumanization is to scrub one's history. To an extent, I mean, it's a tale as old as time. It's
well, you almost force them to adopt you would force them to adopt your culture when they don't know what theirs is too.
Absolutely. In time, that's exactly what you would come to. That's part of why I'm an atheist. But yeah, but yes, in time, that it would you've hit on a completely different conversation. But you're right. That's exactly right.
I mean, that is, and I'm scrolling through very quickly, and going back to things that are shared human experiences. I mean, I'll talk about all the ages that humans experience. These things were felt at roughly the same period, regardless of where you were in the world.
Exactly.
And the two things, and again, something like this, hand-to-hand combat in this way, given our behaviors as species, you would have to think that this was common everywhere. I don't think that that's going out on a limb. And the two areas that are missing, at least from this Wikipedia page, and not to rest too much on Wikipedia, but Africa and South America, completely absent from this. Everywhere else in the world,
you're right,
is
and
represented.
South America does have a history. Well, yeah, exactly. Here's the other thing: we're not talking about it as hand-to-hand combat. As I feel like when you're thinking, you brought it back to like cave, our cave ancestral days. We're talking about something that is.
Well, most sport is derived from some type of
organized. But the thing is, what we're talking about is organized.
And we know that Africa and we know that South America both had sports, like both had
their civilization. Version. I guess that's what we're trying to get at.
Yeah,
they had actual civilization.
They needed entertainment, just like we do now.
Just like we do, right? Exactly. And it's not something that was. It's not as if the Greeks somehow were the civilized people of the time. The world had civilization where people are creating art, they're creating philosophy, they're dabbling in mathematics and astronomy. Western Africa is doing the exact same thing. And this is sort of my tiptoe in, because Vice did a documentary on Senegalese wrestling, and and there's this book that I referenced earlier with regard to hand-to-hand combat, because it's almost like it's a floor to everything else. It's like there's this, like you're saying, it's this first step in civilization of organizing oneself into sport as a form of practicing for military combat, because that's about civilization. That's about organization. You don't have militaries in hunter-gatherer civilizations. It's not civilization. You know what I'm saying in terms of disorganized, or what you would think of as tribal necessarily. We're talking about organized city-states within Africa, for instance, that are developing in the same rate, if not further, than what we normally would think of as the European counterparts or counterpoints, if you will. That's what I have to say. That's my Black history for this episode.
Wow. It is such a blind spot that, I mean, I'd be really curious to know, because sport is something that everyone can relate to, whether you watch it or not. It's so ingrained in our experience. And understanding that something as basic as wrestling, where it's not hard to believe that every culture around the world would have developed some version of this as a sport. And then when we talk about something like Wikipedia, but any other media,
well, especially the
influence
Olympics.
On it, yeah, the Olympics, the influence
representation
of it,
matters. Yeah, exactly.
the way that you think about it, the way that Antoine asked me that question and where my head went.
Exactly.
I mean, and that's almost against everything outside of Western culture, never mind pinpointing it in Africa. The way that we just think of these things as being related to one area or one culture. I mean, it is kind of a reflective moment, both for people listening, people on this pod, me, but then, the way that we operate in our media. It's just really interesting that we don't have a fuller picture. Let me check that. that we do have a fuller picture, but for some reason it's not represented in our resources. Like you have to find it.
You have to, yeah.
But
You have to go hunt
in the aggregators, it's not there.
Right.
And that is an interesting thing, since something like Wikipedia has editors and you have to submit. And it's almost like no one has ever submitted content to this Wikipedia page to represent Africa and cited a book, because that's really all you have to do is you submit the content and then you cite your source and then someone reviews it. And am I to believe that that has never been done for this page?
It might not have been. It might not have been.
You should do it, Antoine, and test it and let us know what happens.
Maybe I will. Maybe I will. Maybe I will.
I mean, you just have to add a sentence in there. They have a list. There is a section of this Wikipedia page that says by country, and it is a sentence per bullet. You just have to put something about Africa in here. And then you submit it, cite the book as your source,
right,
and see if they take it.
Okay.
Just saying.
It's a challenge. It's a challenge. Maybe
it's just
maybe
odd.
This is my, yeah.
I mean,
there are Wikipedia entries for Senegalese wrestling, for instance. There are entries for African wrestling. It's just not converted over to.
Or linked off the main page.
Right, exactly. So yeah, so I probably could just try to link back.
Which makes it even more bizarre. So somebody took the time to create that page and never thought to, or they did, and it was denied, to hyperlink it back to the main page.
Yeah. Anyway,
you know, as a platform that relies on deep links to get you caught going down that click hole, yeah, that's. I don't know Wikipedia. I don't know. I'm tripped up on the oddness of
back
the blind
to you,
spot.
Wikipedia. Maybe we should tweet at them.
Yeah, I think so.
But anyway, yeah, don't want to belabor it. I just wanted to do that little part there. I will also say that we are going to go back because there's some unfinished business from the previous episode with regard to the size of Africa. I definitely could do some clarification here, but we will deep dive a little bit more. But I want to do a slight clarification just in terms of when we were talking about the various stages. We were talking about colonization and slavery, and we sort of mixed them together. We were talking about them not as a concurrent thing, but we were just saying that we weren't really saying, all right, this was attributed directly as a result of slavery. This is directly as a result of colonization. I just want to make the distinction that these are two separate periods in Africa's history. You have slavery as one period, and then there's a second period for colonization. And then the two do leapfrog off of one another, or they springboard off of one another, but it's not as if they're a concurrent thing. Like, I just wanted to clarify.
But we were talking, that's a good clarification, but I think it was all in context of the formation of countries, and those have changed over time.
Yeah,
and they've morphed on what was made before. Exactly. So they're related in that way.
Yeah, right? yes. But I felt like we were getting it. It felt a little muddled. So I just wanted to clarify that for anyone who listened to that episode, to say that there are two distinct periods, and the formation of countries within each of those distinct periods is different.
Fair point.
I have a whole episode for that. The next episode we'll deep dive in that. So we can move on. This is our Black History update for this episode 109. I might as well say it at some point.
Yeah.
And then yeah. What do you have? What are you bringing to this?
And I mean, I don't want to do any disrespect to the topic. I have two silly things.
The topic is done. It's time for silliness. It's time.
All right,
we'll
do it.
It's fine.
We'll do
this is a variety show. This is what people come for. We're all over the place, to our detriment and to our whatever. To our
all right, folks. We jumped right into this one. Sure. I'll say it now. If you haven't subscribed to us yet, please do on YouTube at Retraction Media. If you have already, thanks. And keep listening. We're going to keep going.
Please subscribe to us.
We are recording this the day before Valentine's Day, but we will be releasing it slightly after. But I had this weird Valentine update, and I got to be honest, after I was done reading a couple articles about this, I don't know if you brought this up last year. I was reading this article because something came through as a headline, and I was like, what is this? And I will give it to this zoo in San Antonio, Texas, for fundraising creativity, even though I'm kind of on the fence as to whether or not I'm okay with this. And And if this is something as a culture that we want to foster or associate with wildlife conservation, it seems toxic, a little violent, maybe even some harassment. I don't know. But anyway, apparently, if you donate to the zoo, you can name a cockroach for $10, a rodent for $25, or a vegetable for $5 after your ex. And the zoo will feed it to an animal. And if you pay $150, they'll video it. You can download it, post it on social media, and tag your ex.
We don't need this. I wasn't I just talking the other episode or something. There was some episode where I was talking about how the internet feeds on basic outrage, right? It feeds on the malice, like the worst of our human condition is how basically the algorithm. I was talking about this in terms of AI. What is AI going to learn about the human condition? It's going to learn that we are basically terrible, vengeful creatures, right? Because that's how the internet portrays us.
How is this not online bullying? How is this not bullying?
Yeah, and also, yeah, you're right. I don't understand how it doesn't fall into a sense of bullying, because is there an age limit to this? Because you can have high schoolers just abusing. No,
there's just a limit to how many you can do. I think there's like a limit of like 20 or something.
A group of high schoolers getting together, some girl or some guy that people don't like, raising $150 isn't too hard, and then videotaping them being fed as a cockroach to a lizard or something. I mean, if they were to put that in the school and start circulating it, then it would definitely get picked up as bullying. Absolutely, without a doubt.
I'm reading this because they were like, feed your ex to an animal or something. And I'm like, what is going on? So I really didn't know
where you were going. I was thinking that this was about donations to exhibits. I was like, oh, they have a cockroach exhibit. Oh, there's like an exhibit for mice. You can name, something not big, because, everyone wants to name a panda. Everyone wants to name a lion. So I get that. You don't want to necessarily bring in the billionaire class to donating $10,000 to name your next lion. But I thought that was kind of cute. I was like, oh, you could, they got a cockroach exhibit. This is kind of cool. You get to name a cockroach or something. It's like, that's your cockroach, baby. I was thinking that it was going to be a humanity, like an uplifting piece, and instead it just went left. Went way down into the toilet.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's bullying. There's no way around that. That's bullying.
I couldn't believe it. I could see how people would laugh this off. And I could see how this would be totally abusive, because they were like, oh, you could do it for your boss. They could do it for your ex. You could do it for your best friend. And I'm like, all right, you can't. All,
in a workplace environment, it's even worse.
Yeah.
HR getting involved. No, you can't. This is bullying. You can't do that in a workplace environment. You cannot name a cockroach after your boss, videotape them getting fed to something, and then circulate it. First of all, that could be construed as some sort of death threat.
That's what I was like. Yeah, this is like some weird intimidation. That's why I meant like harassment. Like, how can you do this? And they're doing it. It's at least the second year they've done it. They've even released the popular names from last year and this year.
I mean, they've gotten lucky because it's one psychopath down the, it's one
oh my god, doing it to the wrong person.
Exactly. This is not
someone who can't.
That's a terrible idea.
Someone who can't handle the mental stress of being mocked in public. Like, you shouldn't have to deal with that anyway.
The mental stress of being publicly shamed and bullied. Yeah, exactly. To live on in perpetuity on the internet, because nothing gets deleted, nothing is dissolved on the internet. I mean, that's it's a terrible idea. I just cannot believe that this has survived to a second year. It's an awful, awful idea.
Yeah, and the fact that it's making a ton of money, that it's so successful, they brought it back. I mean, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised because of human nature. It's just
bully people.
I mean, I'm hoping it's all like gags and everyone's in on the joke and it's cool. I'm just worried about the potential.
I doubt it.
If there's not already harassment happening, it just seems really cruel.
It's not something that,
listen, breakups are bad, folks. Breakups are bad. Sometimes one person's at fault, sometimes both are at fault, but doing this
doesn't have to be a breakup, though. I mean, it could be
that's what I mean.
They're framing it that way.
They're framing it as an ex. It could be. You're right. It could be anyone. It could just be someone you're picking on.
Someone you're just picking on. Exactly.
Yeah.
It could be some kid in school that everyone calls Beetlehead. And then all of a sudden you just, you name a cockroach after, it's not good in any way, shape, or form. It's just not good.
Yeah,
it's not something you want to be doing.
It did not sit well with me. I was reading it and it was just getting worse. And it was bad enough because at first it was name a cockroach after your ex and feed it to an animal. And I was like, that sounds terrible. But I guess cathartic for some. And then I read about you can do a rodent. And then the downloading the video and being able to post it and tag it was just like, that's too much. That's a lot. There's so much room for
it doesn't get the Retraction podcast seal of approval. It is something that is coveted, something that many people really want and clamor for, and these people are never going to get it. They're not getting our seal of approval.
We should name it after the heads of the zoo. Your own donation.
No, we can't go down to their level. What did Michelle Obama say? They go low, we go high. We're going to go high, Jamie. We're not
going to go high?
We're not going to.
All right. So we won't name the cockroach San Antonio Zoo.
No.
Got it.
No, first of all, I mean, no. Zoos are already in enough hot water for their legacy in terms of like, are they actually doing a good service? This is not helping that legacy. This is definitely not a good service. This is a disservice to society. So San Diego Zoo, you did not get the Retraction seal of approval. You're in the naughty list. You're getting a lump of coal this year.
All right. I have another quick one.
Go for it.
But it's more, I'm just curious of your thoughts. And if you dismiss the whole thing, it's fine. But it is about the spy balloon and the few objects that have come in. Have you been following this at all? Have you heard about this at all?
My original intro was going to be Welcome to Retraction, the podcast that will affirm without a doubt that we do not have a spy balloon up in the air tracking you as the listener. We are the only, and I was going to say, we are the only podcast I know of that is willing to make that claim that we are not tracking you as a spy balloon.
I mean, you got to wonder for the podcasts that aren't making that claim.
That's what I'm saying.
What are they doing right now?
And I'm saying,
what are they hiding? What are they hiding?
Exactly. You should listen to a podcast that is avowed. We are affirming that we are not tracking you with a giant spy balloon. Just letting you guys know that. We respect your privacy. Anyway, so yeah, that was the original intro.
So for anyone that doesn't know, the U.S. has now shot down 4 objects from the sky in recent days. At least one object has been confirmed to be a spy balloon from China, and that has caused other identified objects to be down that entered U.S. airspace. Although the Pentagon initially refused to call out extraterrestrials or to rule out extraterrestrials when asked about it, they later came back to clarify that Americans don't have to worry about aliens. Still not a convincing answer, and something a government covering up an alien incursion might say.
Shoot them down. If you're, I guess that could be a very cheeky answer. It's like you have nothing to worry about. We annihilated the extraterrestrials.
We blew up their probe. We blew up their peace offering. It's war now.
It's war now. You have nothing to worry about.
We killed the dove.
Yeah.
But like whatever. So like it's not aliens, but someone asked the question and originally they were like, we're not ruling anything out, and then everyone's like, really? And they're like, no, it's not aliens, guys. It's not aliens. It's freaking balloons. Like we'll figure out who owned them. And that's where they are. But so you have the spy balloon. It entered U.S. airspace because of how slowly it was moving. And since then, we've altered our radars in our $700 billion defense to track slower objects. So, now we're able to do it. Democrats downplay the issue, saying that it's just a balloon and that downing it would reveal our capabilities and play to the hands of the Chinese that are testing our defenses. Republicans blame Biden for taking so long to order a strike and allowing China to gather our intel as it crossed our country, going so far as to say that he let China do this because he's in cahoots with them. China is sad that we shot down their balloon, and say that the U.S. flew 10 balloons over China last year.
That's right. I read that.
And used warships and planes to gather intelligence on China 657 times. You got to respect the odd number, folks. 657 times. And that the U.S. is the surveillance empire, which, fair point.
Fair enough. Fair.
Yeah, can't argue with that. Now, the White House countered them and said that China's accusations are false. And that China's the one with the balloon surveillance program. Like they were like, they had the balloon.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But I mean, they were like, show us our balloon. Where's our balloon? You just let it fly around. So they haven't offered any proof of a US balloon or any valid explanations of why they have them in our airspace. China said that the first balloon was a civilian research craft that blew off course.
That's what I thought.
On the other three.
Said that. I said that actually originally. Remember, I may not have said that on the pod, but yeah, go on.
Well, so the U.S. government says that, and this is now we're getting into the part because all that stuff, like whatever. I mean, I'll just get into this. The U.S. government says that the surge in objects might not be a surge at all. It's just that now that we're aware of this balloon thing from the first one, they've changed their radar to have higher fidelity, so it's more sensitive. And now, so we have more scrutiny.
Yeah, I believe.
And so we're detecting more.
Yeah,
and that seems unsettling to me. That these things have been going on this whole time. It's not that we're saying that anything is nefarious. It couldn't be. That's something else to figure out. But $700 billion a year after year, we don't know what's in our airspace.
You have to ask yourself, where does that money go?
Well, yeah.
And we know it doesn't go to detecting things like surveillance weather balloons. It doesn't.
Well, it should be detecting anything, really.
I mean, it goes into what makes more money, really.
At the end of the day. No, I know that. Right. But if it was about defense, then it should be able to know.
Well, we know it's not. I mean, sorry, guys. It's not. It's not about defense. It's about capitalism.
And the idea that so someone on Twitter was like, what are we going to reveal our defensive capabilities to shoot down a balloon? And I'm like, dude, taking down this balloon should not reveal our defensive capabilities. $700 billion a year after year for what, decades? Like, get real. And then the solution that we have now is to spend $400,000 a Sidewinder missile to take these down.
I mean, that's crazy. That's a ridiculous.
4 Sidewinder missiles at $400,000 a pop to take down these balloons. And so, yes,
should not be necessary.
The defense no bid bloat thing, like, where is this money going? Should we be spending it on stuff that, I don't know, we are able to? Let's reveal our full social capabilities and take care of people.
That would be cool. And take care of people. That would be fantastic. I mean,
the idea that we spend this much money and we have at least one time a foreign power, it doesn't matter if it was on purpose or not, floating something over our continent, and we can't take care of it because we're afraid that it'll reveal something. I don't
think that's true. That's just
it just seems odd.
I think that people. I mean, look, I think that we know this. All right, nationalism is all about protecting the status quo. So anyone who is out there not thinking critically enough to say that this is going to expose us, shooting down a weather balloon exposes the government's secrets for how we defend ourselves, is someone who has never done any research in terms of weapons that are actually in existence. I mean, I would tell that person, type in nuclear submarine and come back to us. I mean, there's so many things out there that we have as deterrents that are incredibly sophisticated that everyone knows exist. It's just you don't know where they are. They can strike at any time. The insanity to be like a weather balloon is exposing is, I don't know. It is just that insane.
So what, you shoot a laser out of a rooftop or a moving vehicle? Like, they have lasers now. Like, I don't know what to tell you, folks.
We also could have. I mean, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. That conversation, it's not a conversation I really want to have. It's so ridiculous of a conversation. It's not the conversation that I think is more apt for our political juncture, like where we are politically in this country, is about the one that Biden was slow to act. But the thing was the size of, what was it, 3 school buses? It's massive. They were waiting. That's the thing. Everyone kept saying, "Oh, can we shoot it down?" And there was like, "If you shoot it down, it's an act of war." It's like, no, that's crazy. That's not what's happening. The only thing that was happening, and I'm gonna go out there, I'm gonna say it, and someone come out here and prove me wrong. The only thing that was happening was they were waiting for it not to be over land, not to be over a place that it could land on other people's houses.
But my point is that how did we not detect it before it even hit our shores? We don't have a sphere of like what?
We don't have radar starts. What is it? The Star Wars program from the Clinton era? No, we don't have the star. Like, I don't know. You're right. I don't know how.
Someone is like, "What do we think? You have a force field bubble that surrounds the ocean?" I'm like, "No, dude.
Say that. I mean, like,
we don't have a force field bubble, but clearly radar can go beyond our shores.
Who's pinging that radar all up and down our shores? Come on, man. You know how much money that would cost? I mean, as much money as we spend,
$700 billion.
It would cost it would cost a lot of money. You have to think about how small this was. Yes, it's 3 school buses, but you got to think like in terms of land mass and in the air.
We did detect it.
Yeah, eventually, sure. When it was over, yeah, sure, we got it. I mean, it is what it is. But no, there isn't like a Star Wars like system that detects every little piece of meteorite or glass or something that flecks over the United States.
So I don't know how we do stuff and whether or not every square inch of the U.S. is being monitored or if there's some type of elaborate pattern.
It's not possible.
And this weather balloon happened to slip through the 2 scanning radar things.
Think about how much of our land space. First of all, we have to even think about.
First of all, they said that it got through because it was moving too slow, and that the way that the radar pings, it doesn't pick up. It doesn't have that level of fidelity.
It's looking for freaking torpedoes. It's looking for things that are at speed that could cause massive destruction. It's not looking for a guy in what was that? What was that? 100 like around the world in 180 days or something like that.
Hot air balloon ride.
Yeah, it's not looking for a guy in a hot air balloon possibly dropping. It's not World War I. This guy's in a hot air balloon.
Not about whether or not they're bombing. No, they're not
a cartoon.
In an old school propeller airplane that's open cockpit dropping bombs out of the side. No, I think
that would be faster than how fast this was moving.
I think it would be more surveillance or anything like that. Or God, if it's a weather balloon.
Think about how big this country is. And what I'm trying to say is that when people look at the election map, for instance, and you've got the red and the blue that keeps populating, states like Nevada, what is it? It's like 5% of the entire state actually has people in it. The rest of it is just desert and either.
Oh God, you could. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I am not. It's not possible. Spy. No, I'm not saying that they were using it to map out our stuff.
I'm saying for us to be able to track. You have to think about how much of our country is uninhabitable. It's just not inhabited. It's to track over all that dead space and the cost that would go into that for things this.
I don't know. Those are all assumptions. I don't know if it would be.
No, I'm telling you, it's not an assumption. I'm going to say challenge me. Look it up. We have so much space in this country that is uninhabited. The cost to man navigation over that space, looking for what have you.
We have that with airlines and everything. We have that stuff. Now, this is just a matter of high altitude.
Airlines?
We know where planes are.
Did you look into the Southwest? Did you look what
That's
happened?
Not where this was. This was what over.
No, I know, but I'm just saying, like
Alaska or something.
Even the air traffic control is an incredibly complicated pinging system between people whose job it is just to be looking for planes at all time. It's not as if we have these massive radars that just tell us where the planes are. It's I guess what I'm trying to say is the Southwest thing was literally a ledger. It was a hand ledger that people were saying, I left this airport at this time. I'm arriving here at another time. Like that, it was like a manually entered pinging book within a computer. Like it's a sophistication that you're trying to allude to. I'm flat out saying does not exist. I'm challenging you to come back to me and look it up and find something.
But I'll never be able to do. Oh, but our government doesn't publish stuff like that. I would never be able to find what our defensive capabilities are.
Okay, fine. You know what? That's the thing.
That's what we're always challenge.
Well, you're right. Yeah, I guess that the boogeyman is always right. I have to say.
I have to. First of all,
it's all classified. It's all hidden.
No, but I can't. I can't. I understand what you're trying to say. I can't buy into it because they did detect it, and all they had to do was change the radar. And now they're saying that they can detect it, and they're detecting them en masse now. There's almost a seeming surge because they're detecting.
And they weren't doing it before for a reason.
And they said that going to cost money. Are they changing now? I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's true.
Okay. I'm going to ask you this.
Unless increasing the frequency changes the shelf life of
then
the
why
equipment.
Would all right? Well, here's
like
my
running
question
an MRI machine more often.
This is my question to you. If there's no cost, why weren't we doing this all along?
Because they had so much noise. According to what they were saying, that there are so many anomalies that happen. I don't know what they would be, birds or God knows what. I have no idea. That happen, and there's nothing that they would do about it anyway, so they weren't tracking for that. Now they have the ability, apparently, to change the fidelity, but then to also filter out, which I guess is something new, by elevation. So now they're only picking out slow objects at high altitude. And I guess it never was a need before. It might be just as easy as that. I don't know. That they was never public outcry, public scrutiny, congressional scrutiny to do that. Now, if all of a sudden our defense budget has to go up by $100 billion to account for that.
First of all, and I feel like we've said "first of all" so many times this episode, but I'm gonna say it deliberately. First
I can't say that it's not going to cost more money. I have no idea.
To say that they are now able to filter as if this is like flipping a switch that they just chose not to flip.
I don't know. I'm not saying that that's what it was.
It's not. That's
there
my
might
point.
be
it's not
some calculations, some programming,
it's more
some
than
code
that.
writing.
I don't know. Either now
Antoine, you don't know either.
I do know.
You don't know.
As reasoned people that if you could do something easily, you would have just done it all along. There would not be an issue. You would have started there. There has to be a reason why
I think that they should have been doing this, and I think that there probably was a reason. And whether or not they're releasing that reason to the public, I don't know. If it's a cost thing, God, an excuse for the government to get even more money. Okay, this is going to cost us $100 million a year. Let's do 5, and we'll have an extra 4.
Yeah, because this one is actually costing the taxpayers without a reach around. Where there probably is no back end for politicians or anyone with stocks to get some sort of dividends, like to get some sort of.
I don't know. I'm
just putting it out there. I'm just saying, obviously, this is actually just a real cost. It's one thing is for the cost of people.
But you started with we're not monitoring it all, and that didn't sound like the issue. The issue was the frequency at which we were monitoring. It wasn't so much that we weren't monitoring. And why I even brought all this up with what is it, stop at the border and everything, is because of what people were saying. The arguments that people were putting up just weren't making any sense. You poked holes in several of them, and some of them were just that, what do you want us to do? Monitor outside of our borders? And I'm like, yeah, of course you would. Of course you would want to know things before they hit your shores. And yes, we do. Absolutely.
We do. Yeah, we absolutely do. But for things that, again, we're talking about weapons of mass
destruction. And so if you change the frequency now and the balloons are coming in, and the argument was we wanted to make sure that they weren't over any residential areas or critical structure, then don't ever let them hit the shores.
Hey, sure. Just add more money to the defense budget. Sure. Let's do it.
I don't see why.
I do see why, because it's not necessary. Because these pose no danger, no threat.
I don't know that. That's what the Democrats are saying, and I honestly have no idea. I don't know what equipment a balloon of 3 bus sizes can carry to collect intelligence in some way. I have no idea. Do I think that it's spreading noxious gas all over the place? No. But I have no idea what these things do. That's the job of the military. Go figure that out.
Yeah,
the thing is, $700 billion a year every year. I shouldn't even have to know about this. This should have been taken care of way ahead of time.
Oh, clearly that money wasn't going into this. But now,
why is this even a conversation? Why are people worried about balloons? Why are people worried about balloons? And not in a way that balloons are silly, in the way that it's a balloon. It's a balloon. We should just be able to wish that away and say, don't worry about it.
We spend enough.
No, we shouldn't use a $400,000 Sidewinder missile to take it out.
Here's the other amazing thing. I wonder if most Americans know that. Let's say if Russia launched all its nukes tomorrow toward America, we're not going to shoot them all down, right? Like everyone knows that. Like I want people to know that. You spend $700 billion, you're not shooting down every single.
I don't know where the connection here. Yeah,
I'm just pointing it out. I'm just saying that you're talking about tracking things that are coming into our space. I'm saying I'm trying to think of the most important thing to track coming into our airspace. No general is going to tell you we are going to get every single missile as it comes into this country.
You don't think our Iron Curtain can handle it?
What's that?
Our Iron Curtain can't handle it?
No, it cannot, because we don't realize that in one single missile shoots out 24 other nukes.
We're not going to reveal our full defensive capabilities to the enemy.
Yeah, that's one thing you think you'd want to let them know, that even if you fired every single missile you have no chance of hitting us. That's something that I think you would just go out and say
whether it's every nuke you have or one balloon, you will not
touch these shores. That's right. We can't say that. Not only, and there's no. I'm trying to think. What is the benefit of not saying that? I'm trying to say, are you just trying to test them into it? At that point, you want to say, oh, we can't shoot them all down, So you should try. What like what is the? I'm just trying to get at this. What is the? What do you think?
I agree.
Is the
It just doesn't
benefit
make
to that?
the argument that we don't want to reveal that we have space lasers. I don't know.
Yeah, how's that helpful? It's not helpful to anybody. It just says,
Keep
"Oh, we want you to
keep them
try."
imagining.
Exactly. Right. Well, maybe. I guess.
Or it becomes a target of espionage, a target of hacking. I mean, to get
Which
that,
it
I don't
already is. There's
Yeah,
all this
that's the
stuff's
thing.
already
Like,
happening. So
I'm sure China knows way more about our defensive capabilities than the general population.
that they could get from a weather balloon going over nothing. Yeah, that's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. I will say that. Anyway,
maybe they did it. Maybe they did it to further divide the country.
I think at this
And
rate,
it's a
our
social
enemies
experiment.
know.
It is a social experiment, and they are winning.
I think our enemies are well aware that anything done at this point divides the country.
Russia did Facebook
right,
ads. Russia did Facebook ads. China did.
China does weather balloons. What's next? Because everything divides. Exactly. The fact that this is a red or blue issue is also insane. That's absolute insanity. Because you're right. The military isn't red or blue. I mean, we know they're conservative, slightly erring on fascism, but in general, the military isn't supposed to be red or blue. So it should just be a question like both red and blue should just ask if the military felt like they couldn't shoot it down. It's not Biden's fault. That should be a military question, which is what you're saying. You're saying $700 billion. Where's the money going? That should be a military question. Biden should have said, "Hey,
Biden didn't factor into
exactly
for me.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. The fact that he is crazy because he should have just said, "Hey, where's our deterrent? Why has this gotten so far? And can we just shoot this thing down to today?" And they're like, "No, we haven't been tracking them, and we need some more time before it can get over the ocean so we don't hurt anybody." And that's a military thing. That's not a Biden thing. He didn't make this up. That's the military.
It's not like the military was like, "Sir, now's the time.
Yeah,
you got to take it out." And he's like,
he said, "No,
let's wait. Days. Let's just give it a couple days."
Exactly.
That didn't happen.
Exactly. That did not happen. So that's a military question. You guys are the red side, pro-military people. You should be asking your own side what's going on with that. You can't be blaming the Democrats about that because again, we have no evidence that Biden said no, don't shoot it down. Wait, it was a complete military call. So it's
my whole issue was this defense that we're all so proud of, where we know we have an offense.
Right.
You would think that our defense was even stronger, unless we really are a good defense is a great offense, and that's not good. I don't like
that. Well, I mean, that's still pretty bad if the balloon could get this far, because then you would say that
it's just blowing my mind. Right. It's not that the balloon. It's not that the balloon is dangerous. It's that how did it even get in?
Yeah.
It's embarrassing.
It is to a degree, absolutely, and that may have been the point: is to embarrass our military, embarrass our ability to defend ourselves. I mean, that makes sense for adversaries. So they've won. They've won being able to hover a meaningless balloon over our airspace for days on end and have us track it through the media. I mean, it is what it is. But at the end of the day, it's not Americans who win in these cases. It's our enemies because we are fragmented and we need to be one.
That's right. There you go.
You know, it's a good way to make one community. Socialist values.
Wow. You know what
Capitalism is inherently divisive. Anyway, do you have anything else before this episode comes to a close? Okay.
No. No.
Okay.
What would a socialist society have done with this balloon, Antoine?
Well, at least you'd be united. People would have their health care. They'd have their equity. Their living standards. I'm just saying they might not be at each other's throats saying whose side, we would probably be pointing the finger at the right person. Everybody would say what's going on with the military. There wouldn't be a red or blue thing because there'd be no need for that. You'd have all your needs met, so so you wouldn't need to what do you call it? Not imprint, but you wouldn't need to
so what's
the word I'm looking for?
Yeah, we're not going to hate each other. We're going to hate the other outside of our country,
which makes sense. That's a more plausible, that's a more rationalistic aspect to our society. You should be more upset with China en masse. You should be like, stop sending these meaningless balloons over our airspace. We are one. We are one country. don't do this to us. We're not going to.
I mean, it sounds like we should be able to sue this Chinese corporation for at least $400,000 to replace a Sidewinder missile.
You probably could if you didn't have all these dependencies in terms of various corporate trade.
You think I can start a class action lawsuit on behalf of the people?
You could try. You'll find out real fast whose side this country might be on. So you could try that. See how far that goes. See what happens when Amazon starts knocking on your door as being like, stop interfering with our poorly manufactured goods.
All right.
Anyway,
there we are, folks.
There we are. We're bare. Jamie, where can they find us?
You guys can find us on YouTube every week with new content. So please like, subscribe, and enjoy the show. We're also on Twitter and various podcast platforms. Share us with a friend today.
And with that, we bid you a very welcome Retraction out.